Julie. Good morning, everybody. What a pleasure it is to introduce my accomplished colleague from the Classics Department at UF, Dr. Marianne Eaverly. Dr. Eaverly received her AB from Bryn Mawr College and her PhD in Classical Art and Archaeology from the University of Michigan. She was also a fellow at the prestigious postgraduate research institution in Athens, the American School of Classical Studies. Professor Eaverly has been at UF since 1986. She is the author of 2 books and numerous articles on issues in early Greek art and the use of mythological and archaeological imagery in the work of modernist women poets. She has excavated in Greece, Israel, Cyprus, and Spain, and is past president of the Gainesville Society of the Archaeological Institute of America, and is a member of the managing committee of the American School of Classical Studies in Athens. She is the winner of several university teaching awards, and deservedly so. Students find her presentations lively and insightful. Her student evaluations describe her as amazing, awesome, and the best. They also mention that she's sometimes known to sing in class. And I just asked her about that, but it's in her mythology class. So I think probably we're not going to have singing this morning.
And you will be very grateful that you're not, believe me.
She has served 2 terms as chair of the Classics Department, earning praise from her colleagues for discharging her duties in an exemplary fashion. And that's not an easy task, being a chair these days. She attributes her love of archaeology to the many museum trips she took with her father in her youth, and his recollections of her great-grandfather, a classics professor at a now closed historically Black college. So we're very fortunate to have Professor Eaverly today talking about ancient Roman beauty secrets from Pompeii.
Thank you very much, Sheila, for that wonderful introduction. It's not my first time in this room. About 6 or 7 years ago, I taught a mythology class here, and it was a great joy. I really had a wonderful time. So I'm very happy to be back here to talk to you today about ancient Roman beauty secrets. Yeah, which we will do in this. And you should be very delighted that I am not singing. I sing in that class because it is the only place where people cannot stop me from singing because they're worried about their grade. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. All right, so my topic is ancient Roman beauty secrets, the evidence from Pompeii. You probably won't take away anything from this that you can use in your own beauty regimen, but you may be surprised at how many things have not changed. We go, click there. Okay, so a long time ago, but I'm sure many of you remember, there was a show called Dragnet, and it used to start with, "This is the city." So this is the city, this is Pompeii, that was destroyed in AD 79 by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. And so what you see in this slide is actually the excavated portion of Pompeii with Vesuvius in the background. I should add that Vesuvius is an active volcano, so it is not dormant. The eruption, however, was not an eruption in the manner that we might think. It was not lava, but instead it was ash and rock and gas. And because of that, the types of things that were preserved at Pompeii are things that you cannot find from other Roman sites. For example, we have many of the victims of Pompeii, whom you see here. It was not the type of eruption where people were frozen in place. People sometimes think that it was an event where you said, "Oh, what's that?" And then that was the end of you. No, it went on for several days, and so people did have the chance to make the decision to stay or go. The people who stayed thought they would be safe, huddled in their houses. Didn't work out for them. They were basically, most of them were asphyxiated or buried. And what you see here is the actual people in the 19th century, and archaeologists figured out how to make plaster casts so that inside these plaster casts are the actual skeletons of the victims of the eruption. As I said, the nature of the preservation was different from any other site, such that we even have bread that was in the ovens preserved from Pompeii. So this is carbonized bread. When I teach this to my undergraduates, I always ask if anybody has any chemistry background, because carbonization, that's as far as I can go with it. And I'm always afraid the chemist will raise a hand and explain to me that I need to say more about it. But basically, the bread was molecularly altered. So this is the actual shape of a Roman bread loaf. And those are the kinds of things that you cannot get from sites that weren't preserved in this manner. You can't cut into this slice of bread, clearly, but it perfectly preserves the shape of the bread. But we're not here to talk about bread. We're here to talk about beauty secrets. And in addition to the bodies of the Pompeians, also preserved for us is their images, paintings, sculpture. So what we're going to examine today is how these individuals ended up looking this way, at least in terms of cosmetics. The figure in the statue, the bronze statue, is a man who we think was a banker. The woman below him, we don't actually know who she is, and we don't really know who the couple is. So we don't know their names, but they are portraits of people who lived in Pompeii. I'm going to focus first on women because, let's face it, women have to go through more for the beauty ritual than men do. So I'm going to spend a lot of time with women, but I'm not forgetting about the men. Now, we're going to look at evidence from Pompeii, but we do have ancient literary sources that talk about beauty. And here are 4 that would overlap with the time of Pompeii. Ovid, who was a writer who specialized in writing about, well, at least one of his specializations was writing about seduction. And he's basically telling you how to meet people, how to have an affair, basically, which was against what the emperor at his time, the Emperor Augustus, wanted people to do. Augustus had a policy of what I guess we would call a family values policy, and this went against it. So Ovid was eventually exiled, but he does give us a lot of information about how to be seductive, much of which concerns cosmetics. Pliny the Elder was someone who was just interested in everything, and he wrote what I guess would be an encyclopedia called the Natural History. You might notice if you look at his dates, sorry, these are all, his dates are all AD, but if you look at the last date, you see 79, and that should ring a bell with you. Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, and in fact, Pliny died in the eruption of Vesuvius. He was not at Pompeii, but it was a very wide-ranging disaster, and he died as part of the disaster. He had lung problems, and he couldn't breathe the heavy ash-filled air where he was, and died. Martial is a poet who wrote epigrams, which are witty critiques of his society. And Juvenal wrote satires, which also were critiques of his society. So we can get evidence about how the Romans took care of themselves from all of these ancient sources. So what I'm going to do is use some quotes from them and also show you how we can find evidence that this actually holds true from Pompeii. So we're going to start with skincare and makeup. This is a mosaic from a house in Pompeii. We are used to the idea that mosaics should be on the wall, but in Pompeian houses, mosaics were on the floor. and we would probably have a hard time walking across someone's face, but apparently this did not trouble the Romans. So this is a floor mosaic which shows you a Pompeian woman. Again, we don't know who she was, but we're going to talk about some of the things that she might have done to give herself the appearance that she has in this mosaic. And Ovid tells us, we need to appear bright and radiant. And nothing has changed, has it? I see ads for cosmetics today that tell me that there's something out there that tells me if I just rub it on, I will glow. Okay, so everybody wants to be bright and radiant, and they did back then. But this recipe seems a bit complex. Ovid says, first, strip away the husks and chaff from some barley, and not just any old barley, preferably the variety sent from Libya by boat. Okay. Clean 2 pounds of this barley. Moisten an equal amount of vetch. Vetch is a kind of a pea-related grassy thing that cattle eat, basically. It's farm animal food. So moisten an equal amount of vetch with 10 eggs. When the barley has dried in blowing breezes, crush it with a rough millstone turned by a lazy donkey. Okay, we don't want an energetic donkey. No, grind up along with the barley the horns of a lively young stag. So our donkey's got to be lazy, but our stag needs to be lively. Add 12 narcissus bulbs, stripped of their outer layers and pulverized on pure marble. Okay, then add 9 times as much honey. If you pamper your face with such a mixture, your skin will be smoother and more radiant than your own mirror. Okay, so I hope you've all been writing this down. Fortunately, it's recorded, so you'll be able to take advantage of this. Now, Pliny the Elder is a little more straightforward. Remember, Ovid is somebody who writes about seduction. Pliny is an encyclopedist. So his natural history says, okay, you got some skin imperfections, don't worry about it. Get milk of an ass, all right? Butter and lead. Yes, well, we now know that lead is probably not the best thing to be involved with, but they didn't. One theory that was floated a long time ago about the decline of the Roman Empire was that they had lead pipes for their water. They did have lead pipes for their water, but the water had so many minerals in it that it actually coated the inside of the pipes so the lead didn't leach. However, there were some other sources of lead in their diet besides this skin cream. They thought that a lead syrup tasted really good when you mixed it with wine. Okay, so, all right, Pliny also suggests swan fat and calf genitals cooked with honey and vinegar, and the ever popular bull bile and water. Okay, so you are laughing at all of these things that Pliny suggests. Do you know what's in this? Really? I mean, we put things on our skin that very well may well have things even stranger than bull bile and water, right? So we can't laugh at them too much. You could also, of course, get rid of unwanted hair. One area of hair that they particularly plucked was underarm hair. Yes, and these are the tweezers. That must have been fun. There was a specialist in hair plucking whose technical term for a hair plucker is an alipilus. These are tweezers that were found at Pompeii. The alipilus was also very active in the Roman baths. In the afternoon, most Romans would go to the public baths where they would bathe, certainly, but they'd also get beauty treatments, one of which was having hair plucked. And we learned from one of the other sources that's not part of our group in today's talk that the hair plucker had a very high-pitched cry. and that you could immediately tell where the hair plucker was, and you could call the hair plucker over because of this high-pitched cry. And I would, when I talk to my students about it, I try to think of what would we have today, and the only thing I can come up with is something that dates me anyway. But when I was a child growing up on the Jersey, well, in Philadelphia, we would go to the Jersey Shore for vacation, and there was always a guy who would carry a big ice chest with popsicles and things in it on the beach, and he was the fudgy wudgy man. And he had a very high-pitched cry, "Here, get your fudgy wudgy wudgy." So I think of the Allopilis as maybe having a cry like that. Now, you might overdo it, though. Juvenal says, so you put all that stuff on, but that face transformed and softened with endless poultices, plastered with endless cakes of flour. So here's something else apparently you could use. Cooked and soaked. Would you call it a face or a sore? Okay, so he's pointing out that perhaps one can overdo the skin treatments. But while we're looking at this particular woman, who I don't think her face looks like a sore, but we might focus in on what exactly is going on with her hair. And that's the next part of everything that we're going to look at is hair. Now, hairstyles are in many ways an archaeologist's best friend because women tended to adapt whatever the popular style that the empress was wearing was. And so we know the dates of the empresses, and we can then date some of the statues based on the hairstyle. So here on the right, you see the Empress Livia. She was the wife of the Emperor Augustus. If any of you ever saw I, Claudius, you'll know that she was quite something. Well, there's Livia, but on the other side is a woman from Pompeii. And you notice she has the central part in her hair and all the little curls. So she is, in fact, emulating Livia's hairstyle. Now, she probably never would have seen the actual Livia, but part of the Roman imperial propaganda was basically that they would send out portraits to the various towns. So everybody would know what the emperor and the empress looked like, or at least what statues of the emperor and the empress looked like. Because, for example, Livia's husband, Augustus, had many, many statues and lived to be, a good age, but never aged in his statues. But the people in Pompeii would have known what at least the image of Livia was, and would have wanted to have their hair look like Livia's hair. Now, this is not from Pompeii, but it does show you the hairdresser at work. And here Ovid says, "I can't bear those women who scratch their hairdresser's face, seize the hairpin from their hand, and jab it in the arm." I mean, I've had some bad haircuts, but I just sort of, usually you just slink out of the store and say to yourself, it'll grow back, but not in the Roman world, right? If you're not happy, this could be achieved for many respects because the person doing the hairdresser, was probably a slave in the household. And so the mistress was able to stab her to her heart's content. Now, what was she stabbing her with? Hairpins. And these are hairpins preserved from Pompeii. They're ivory, and you see they're decorated on the top. There are also silver hairpins, bronze hairpins. Okay. And Marshall says, "Lest your hair, drenched in ointments, should stain your fine silk dresses, pass a large pin through the braided locks and sustain them." So these are the pins that help you have these curls in your hair. And you might also say, well, how did they get the actual curls? The same way that you can get curls today. They basically had a curling iron because, we're used to the plug-in curling iron, but before there was the plug-in curling iron, there was just the plain curling iron that you put on the fire. You heated up a piece of metal and you curled the hair with it. So they did have that. And then he talks about the comb, and you see this is an actual comb that was preserved from Pompeii and seems to have, two sides, two strengths of teeth in this comb. So if your hair is really thick, you could use the bigger side, and if it's thin, you could use the finer side. But many of these hairpins, silver, bronze, and ivory, have been found at Pompeii. Now this is the hairstyle that was coming into fashion at the time of the eruption. And we might be hard put to say, wow, but this was it. This is what every Pompeian woman was aspiring to right before the eruption. You can see a pile of curls in front and then braids in back. So you would really need those hairpins to keep this thing going, all right? And there is another, I think it's Ovid, who says, it's interesting. I ran into so-and-so the other day, and she looked completely different. It was a completely different person from the front and the back. And you can see this hairstyle would certainly lend itself to that. Ovid says, I cannot enumerate all the hairstyles. Every day brings new ones. This is a very famous statue. It's not from Pompeii, but it's a very finely carved example of this, what we call Flavian hairstyle. That was the dynasty that had just really taken over around the time of Pompeii's destruction, before Pompeii's destruction, but was the dynasty that was in place when Pompeii was destroyed. So this was the cutting edge, the latest fashion that any person who was living in Pompeii and didn't survive the eruption would have seen. Now, just like us, they thought that it was important to dye your hair, right? If you've got gray hair, or maybe you don't like the color of your hair. So what are you going to do? Well, one of the remedies is one that's still in use today, henna, which of course we use today, and it turns the hair a kind of red color. So that's a natural hair dye. And of course, all of their beauty secrets were 100% natural. They had no chemical beauty secrets. Like many people, I remember when I was growing up, there was an ad, is it true blondes have more fun? Well, they thought blonde was the hair color they were after too. So you could dye your hair blonde with a mixture called sapo, which was animal fat and beechwood ash mixed together. And that would give you blonde. But suppose you just couldn't achieve that effect, or suppose your hair was thinning or falling out, you could have a wig. And again, natural wigs, all natural hair, because they didn't have the capacity to make synthetic hair. And so the hair color was based on the people they got the hair from. So Germany was particularly prized as a source for wig hair because of the blonde nature of this German hair. So you could get these natural hair wigs. But Ovid tells us that this can go wrong sometimes, this hair dyeing. So he says, didn't I tell you to stop messing around with the color of your hair? Now you have no hair left to dye. And we certainly know that, I'm not casting aspersions on Revlon color silk, but we certainly know that it is possible to burn out our hair today with chemical dyes. Well, apparently they were able to destroy their hair with their natural dyes as well. So he says, now remember, he writes about seduction, and if you listen to this passage, it certainly is seductive the way he describes her hair. If you had left it alone, who had thicker hair than you? And when you let it down, it used to hang to your waist. It was very fine, so fine that you hesitated to curl it with curling irons, like the silk fibers the Chinese produce, or the threads which the spider spins with slender legs when she weaves a delicate web under a deserted beam. But it was neither raven black nor golden blonde. See, here he's really, it was a mixture of the two, the color of cedar wood when the bark has been stripped away. And it was easy to manage, naturally curly, and didn't cause you any trouble. You didn't have to worry about pins or combs being caught in tangles and hurting when they were pulled out. And here we have a recurrent theme. Your hairdresser was never bruised or scratched. Right? So he's describing this woman as having this beautiful hair, and it really is quite seductive, his description of her fabulous hair. Now your hair has fallen out, and you alone are responsible. You yourself mixed the poison and put it on your head. Now Germany will send you her captured locks of hair, and a conquered race will save you from the embarrassment of baldness. So he's talking about, okay, well, you really blew it. So now you are going to have to get a wig from Germany. Okay. And he's talking about it captured. Remember, the Roman Empire was vast. It didn't just include Italy. So you could get hair from Germany. You could get hair from Egypt. You could get hair from wherever you wanted. So she's going to go, he thinks, with the German hair. And women, I said I wasn't going to just talk about women. Men also could get wigs. That was not something that men couldn't do, although it was believed that baldness was a sign of virility. So that the fires inside of you were so strong that they had burned off that hair. So, yeah. Okay, makeup. All right. So Ovid says, what if the face lacks the natural rosy hue that comes from the blood? There are arts to achieve it. Apply your art to reinforce the thin rim of the eyebrows, and let a small mole adorn the milky white cheeks. Nor is there any shame in highlighting the eyes with charcoal or with crocus. Okay, so these are all areas that we pay attention to today, right? People dye their eyebrows, pluck their eyebrows, shape their eyebrows. There are all kinds of tutorials on YouTube about how to get perfect eyebrows, right? A mole, a fake beauty mark, right? The milky white cheeks, why do you want your cheeks to be milky white? It's because that shows that you are an upper class woman. That means you don't have to do work. That means you don't go out in the sun. And so that's why they are emphasizing that. And then, nor is there any shame in highlighting the eyes. Well, we do that today, right? Eyeliner. So there's nothing here that we can't understand. So here's our woman again, and we can see she has very nicely darkened and defined eyebrows, which she may have put ash on to give them a little bit more darkness. You notice her lips are red. To get that red lip look, she couldn't go buy a tube of lipstick, but she could take the dregs from wine and rub that on her lips, or she could get red ochre. And then we also read that they would get finely ground crystal and dust it over their faces. And in fact, I was reading, I guess it was a couple years ago now, that was a fad in makeup, that your face would sparkle with crystal. You would buy this powder that, I think mostly for, teenagers. But anyway, you would sparkle your face with crystal powder. So there's nothing new under the sun. So here she is, beautiful eyebrows. You can see a little line under her eyes. She's got her lipstick. She may have put some of those wine dregs and red ochre on her cheeks. The other thing that people used to do, even in the Victorian era, right, was if you wanted to get that blush in the cheeks, you pinch your cheeks right before you go out. And so the cheeks would be red. So she may have done that, but there she is, beautifully made up. And here, some of the tools that she might have used to apply this makeup. These are basically little makeup sticks, and her makeup mixing bowl is a scallop shell. These things have all been found at Pompeii. So this is her cosmetic kit, her makeup utensils, as it were. Now, this is a kind of a bare bones kit, but here's something a little more elaborate. And Ovid says, "Let not your lover catch you with your jars of cream on the table. A dissimulated art serves beauty all the better." And of course, that's always the thing with makeup, right? Even now that we're trying to achieve the, quote, natural look. The natural look requires a lot of work, right? Back then and now. This is actually somebody's beauty box, somebody's makeup case that was found at Pompeii. It's inlaid with ivory, and you can see some of the ivory tools in place in the box. Okay, so this is so that you could have this on your table and your lover could come in and not know that you had makeup on. I don't know. That's the great conceit of makeup. But and again, poor Ovid was exiled, maybe because he did something. We don't know exactly what he did, but he was exiled, and he was in fact advocating behavior that wasn't particularly popular with the emperor. But he was, let not your lover. You weren't supposed to have a lover, so already his work is a little dangerous. All right, so your skin is glowing. Your lips are red. Your brows are beautiful. You've got eyeliner. You have your little mole. But there's just something else missing, right? Perhaps you need a little fragrance. You need some perfume. Well, Pompeii was a place where they manufactured perfume. This is a wall painting from a house called the House of the Vetii in Pompeii. The Vetii were, we think, wealthy freed men. In Roman society, there are many different classes. At the top are the patricians, the hereditary rich. There are below them everybody else, the regular people. Then there are the freedmen. These are people who had once been slaves but had earned their freedom. And at the very bottom were the slaves. So the Vetii were people who had been slaves but were now freedmen. And while patricians, the hereditary rich, frowned on actually engaging in business, although they had businesses that they were associated with but not hands-on, freedmen were free to make money any way they wanted to. And in this particular house, in the room where they would receive the people they did business with, they had wall paintings that showed various manufacturing activities, but not done by the actual people who would do the work, but done by cupids. So these are cupids making perfume. The people who made perfume were the unguentarii. So these are cupids making perfume. How do you make perfume? Well, basically you need an oil, which would probably be olive oil, and the flowers to get the scent. And that was basically pretty much what you needed to make perfume. So they are busy making perfume. You can see they're crushing something. There are some bottles in a cupboard. But the part that might ring the most true with us is, look, she is sniffing her wrist to smell the scent. And that's what we do today. When you buy perfume, you're supposed to put it on your wrist. Now, we put it on the inside of the wrist, and she's doing it on the outside of the wrist, but still not much difference. Now, Marshall has something to say about all this perfume. He says, when you pass by, it's as if Cosmo the perfumer were moving shop and cinnamon streamed from an upturned bottle. I don't want you, Gelia, to take to such futile things. I think even my dog could smell as well perfumed. Okay, so apparently there were instances, which we have even today, right, of over-perfuming in the ancient world. But again, all their perfumes were natural. So in Pompeii, they have actually uncovered areas where they were growing roses and violets, which would have been some of the scents for the perfume. And here we have a wall painting from Pompeii where we see a woman maybe decanting some of her perfume, and these glass bottles are perfume bottles. I like the ones with the little feet, but they are perfume bottles. And the way it worked was you had your own bottles and you took them to the unguentarii and they filled them with perfume. The idea that you buy the bottle and the perfume together is actually a fairly modern idea. So here she is decanting some perfume into her bottle, and here are these cute little glass perfume bottles. All right, but she's not done, right? I mean, she's glowing, she's made up, but she needs that finishing touch. Oh, and her hair looks good. She needs that finishing touch. She needs some jewelry. Now here we have, again, we don't know who this woman is. She is sometimes identified in the literature as Sappho. She cannot be Sappho, the ancient Greek poet. That is not who she is. She's some Pompeian. The reason why they sometimes identify her as Sappho is because she looks like she's writing, but she is writing on not a papyrus scroll, which you would use for poetry. What she's got is a wax tablet, and these were used for business transactions. So she's showing you that she's a sharp businesswoman in this picture. But we're going to look at her in terms of her jewelry. Pliny says, covered in emeralds and pearls, describing another woman, with glittering jewels on her head, in her hair, on her neck, ears, and fingers. And so if we look at this woman, she's got earrings and she's got a hairnet. And this is an actual gold hairnet that was found at Pompeii. And this is some of the jewelry that was found at Pompeii. The gold jewelry would have been made of gold. They didn't have gold plate, so it was actually gold. And apparently the snake motif was very popular for bracelets. You see these two snake bracelets. Here's a necklace, a bunch of rings, a necklace with pearls and uncut gemstones, and a less expensive glass necklace. So all of this would be something that she could choose from to complete her look. The gold itself was valuable by weight, not so much by craftsmanship. We're used to the idea that, how many hours did the craftsman spend? But for them, it was how much gold was in it, how much did it weigh? This is a very interesting gold bracelet that was found at Pompeii. It's the snake type that we're used to, but it actually has an inscription inside it. And this inscription has caused much debate. The inscription says, "From the master to his little slave." And so we don't know, is this the actual master of the house who's giving this to a slave girl? The master of the house had complete control over everybody in his household, and the enslaved people in his household were part of his control. So any woman that he wanted in the house, he could have had. But why is he giving her a bracelet? And what would that bracelet have meant if his wife had seen it? We're not really sure about that. So some people have said, well, no, it's more a pet name, right? You're my little slave and I'm your master. We have no idea, but it's one of those intriguing things that is found at Pompeii. Rings, all kinds of rings you can see here. Now, one of the other things that's preserved at Pompeii, I was talking about literary sources, and I'm using very important Roman writers to talk about, but Pompeii is full of graffiti, just people writing on the walls. And why are they writing on the walls? Well, I'll just go back for a second. You can see this pointed instrument. This is a stylus. You use this to scratch into wax for record keeping, but the walls are covered with plaster, and it's just apparently irresistible when you're out and about with your stylus to not write on the walls, not to scratch into the walls. And it's like, I guess it's like Twitter today, because you see messages and people respond to the messages. So they're all over the place. Now, this particular one, this guy is talking about longing just for an hour. I wish I could be the gem on this ring to give you the kisses I've planted on it when you moisten it with your mouth to see the seal. Here's the seal. So he envisions that she is moistening the ring and he's wishing he were the ring and that she would kiss him. And we have all kinds of graffiti about all kinds of situations. My absolute favorite one is somebody who is at a building. He identifies what the building is and tells us when he was there. It doesn't get any better for archaeologists than that. He identifies the building and he dates the building. And why he felt the need to do that, we don't know. But the graffiti covers all kinds of topics. Okay. Also, beautiful earrings, pearls, and these kinds of earrings done in a technique called granulation, which is very difficult to achieve because it's not done in a mold. It's drops of gold. And you think about it, the gold has to be kind of hot to make a drop, but then if it's too hot, it would splat onto the surface. So this is very finely done work. And these also come from Pompeii. And Juvenal says, you wear all that gorgeous jewelry, and you think you can get your way in anything. Women think they can afford to do whatever they like when they hang great pearls on their ears, stretched low with excessive weight. And supposedly Cleopatra had some fabulous pearl earrings as well. So the allure of the pearl earring and the confidence it gave women is satirized by Juvenal. Now, here we have an actual person. She doesn't come from Pompeii, but the eruption of Vesuvius didn't just destroy Pompeii, it also destroyed its sister city, Herculaneum. You saw the bodies that were found at Pompeii. Well, for a long time, no bodies were found at Herculaneum. And so everybody said, okay, well, Herculaneum's on the other side of the volcano, so they probably had, they had enough time to actually get away, and so that's why we don't have any bodies. And then in the 80s, some workmen were poking around in Pompeii because there was a water leak, in Herculaneum, because there was a water leak. And as they started to try to repair this water leak, they found skeletons. They called the police because at first they thought it was, some mass murder. But no, this turned out to be the Herculaneans. They had actually all run down to the shore. Not all of them, but a sizable group. So 300 of them were found by the shore. And this is one of them. The forensic anthropologist who was assigned to investigate these skeletons called this one Ring Lady for obvious reasons. She's got rings on. She also was carrying with her, she's not wearing these, but she had a sack with her, and the sack is disintegrated. And in the sack, she had her snake bracelets and some earrings. So you know what they say, you can't take it with you. She was trying to take it with her, but didn't succeed. She also had, one thing, beautiful teeth, because the Romans didn't have that great enemy of teeth, refined sugar. So they had pretty good teeth. So our woman her makeup is on. This one is having a little trouble with her hair, but theoretically her makeup is on. She's perfumed, she's bejeweled. Doesn't she want to know how wonderful she looks? Okay, so she has to look into a mirror. And that is what this woman is doing. She's holding a mirror and she's looking into the mirror. Now, the mirror was not glass. They did not have reflecting glass mirrors. They had highly polished silver or bronze. So if you think about it, you never really got a clear look at yourself. You think about our selfie-obsessed world where we, they're telling us that our pores are too large and you have to do things to shrink your pores. Well, a Roman woman wouldn't really have been able to see those pores. She would have gotten a kind of a fuzzy glimpse of herself. So that's the viewing part. This is the other side, which would have been beautifully decorated. This is silver. And here you see a mythological story, Leda and the Swan. This is a story of seduction. Zeus is going to seduce Leda in the form of a swan and going to end up with children that are very important in the Trojan War story, but we won't do that this time. So anyway, she's got a chance to look at herself and she thinks, my skin glows, my eyebrows look good, I've underlined my eyes, my lips look nice, my hair's fine, I stabbed my hairdresser a few times, but I'm looking good. And that then completes her beauty secrets. Now, I said I wasn't just going to do women, so we need to do men. For men at the time of the eruption, clean shaven was the look. And these are two portrait heads from Pompeii. Again, we don't know who these individuals were, but you can see they are clean shaven. To be clean shaven, you need to have a barber do it for you. Okay, so going to the barber was not a pleasant experience for Roman men. Why is that? Well, you think about going to the barber today, maybe there's a hot towel and, no. There is a bronze razor with cold water. So Marshall says, those scars you see on my chin, like the mark of some old boxer's face, were not made by my angry wife in one of her tempers, but by the cursed hand and blade of Antiochus the barber. The he-goat is the only beast with any sense. He wears a beard to escape Antiochus. Okay, so here is one of these bronze razors. And Roman men put up with it until finally, in the 2nd century AD, the Emperor Hadrian grew a beard. And then everybody breathed a sigh of relief, and men were able to grow beards. But for the most part, during this time, a beard was a sign of a philosopher or somebody who was a little alternative, not somebody who was part of the establishment. Now, Pompeii, the whole site, has many secrets to reveal. It has not been completely excavated. And in fact, they're doing new excavations right now in Region 5 where they're uncovering all kinds of fascinating things. So our picture of Roman everyday life as revealed by Pompeii is constantly changing. But I hope that you enjoyed learning something about these ancient beauty secrets, which are not very different from what we do today. And I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay.
I can walk out here.
Hello. I remember reading in a book or article that the presence of lead in cosmetics helped lead to the decline of the Greek and Roman civilizations. It decreased not only the health of the women, but when they were pregnant, it would pass through the placenta into the children and affect them, their cognitive abilities and other bodily functions.
They did use lead in cosmetics because they wanted that, the upper class women wanted that pale look, and the lead would give you that pale look. I mean, on the other hand, the fall of the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire lasted for centuries, and they were doing these things for centuries, so there was no real direct, cause of that. It didn't help people to be covered with lead and to drink lead-laced wine, but it wasn't an immediate effect. The empire lasted for centuries. Slow effect, yeah. I'm hearing you. Okay. Or I can repeat your question. Okay, the question was, what would somebody who wasn't upper class do to improve their beauty? And probably as much of the same things as they could. You know, they would have access to the soot and the wine dregs. I mean, they probably wouldn't have the lazy donkey, but churning the barley, but they might have some other, you know, they could have butter, they could do other things to their skin. The difference is, of course, that the lower class are out there in the sun working, so they're going to have, you know, sun tanned skin, which is a giveaway that you're not a patrician, or they're going to have, you know, worn hands. And in fact, one of the skeletons that was found at Herculaneum, she identified the class of the woman because the woman had all of the marks of having muscles, right? And no patrician woman would have muscles because you know, you weren't supposed to do that. So they probably, you know, would have tried to emulate as best they could what they saw.
Thank you. We have a question here on Zoom. Hi, Phyllis, go ahead.
Oh, Dr. Eaverly, thank you so much
Hi.
for a fascinating talk. I've been to Pompeii a couple of times as an adult, but only saw the south, I think what would be the southwestern area, because that's where the tour guides took us. We're not allowed to wander around Pompeii on our own, I think. But yeah, I've always wondered about the cosmetics. So it seems to me that some of these potions would have been for sale. So it wasn't just limited to the upper class, surely. If people in business had the money, they could probably buy it on the market, don't you think?
Well, no, that's a good point, because we certainly know that perfume was for sale. So why could there not have been the cream person or the, yeah. We haven't identified the shop of the glowing cosmetic person, but it doesn't mean it didn't exist. Yeah.
It's on.
I can, but I can repeat your question.
No, we traded.
Looking at those recipes like that Sappho, they honestly use that. I mean, that ash in there. What surprised me is sort of a two-parter question. One of the things is, isn't that ash kind of caustic? You know, do they have anything like dermatologists to treat these ladies and these guys? It just seems amazing. Lead and ash and all that you slather on your face.
But we don't know what we're putting on our faces too. You know? The chemicals. But the question was, you know, wasn't that caustic? And did they have dermatologists to treat some of these things? And they did have doctors, but the doctors were a little bit hit or miss too. You could also go to the gods for healing. And you know that you talked about the caustic ash. Well, that's what he said. He said, you know, you used to have beautiful hair, and then you dyed it so much it fell out. So yeah, they we do foolish things too for beauty. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Here. I'll come.
Okay. I'll repeat.
The tweezers full.
The two questions were, how do we know that the tweezers were for underarm hair removal? Well, I guess that's just because we get so many literary references to this Alapilus who does the underarm hair removal. And then the comb was made out of a bone. It was made out of bone.
I have a question.
Okay.
Have deodorant?
They had a lot of perfume. And they had a lot of scents that assaulted them such that maybe they were nose blind to a lot of things. I mean, toga cleaning, toga processing was done in plants that used human urine to process them. And there were vats around town where people could make deposits. So it was kind of a smelly world.
We have one more here. Go ahead, Phyllis.
I understand that they used olive oil for body bathing, and that they would smear the olive oil on and then scrape it off. And the baths weren't for washing so much as just for relaxation and social engagement. But the baths, of course, were unchlorinated and could become a vector for diseases. What was the expected lifespan in Rome of the non-slave population, if you have any information on that?
Well, people, if you could make it past 10, you could live to a 50 or 60 or so, but it was getting to past 10 was hard. Like there was like a 50% cutoff before you got to 10 years old. That was the hard part. But what you were saying about the baths is true. There was water there, and you splashed and you relaxed. If you worked out, you would cover yourself with olive oil, and then there was a bronze tool that you would scrape the dirt and olive oil off with. And you're right, there was no chlorine in those baths, and the ancient physician Galen advises not to go to the baths with a cut because this could lead to gangrene. So, but people went every afternoon. They would get up in the morning and do these things, and then the baths were in the afternoon, and then after the baths was dinner. So that was what they would do.
One of the questions on chat said, and maybe you can repeat it, it said the cones reminded her of a lice cone, and the question was that a problem?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure they must have had lice, right? I know, that's a good question. The comb reminded her of a lice comb. I don't know. I'm sure they had lice. I can't believe that they didn't have lice, but that's a good observation.
With the archaeological remains, and so I think folks will have learned, as they already do, what an intriguing place Pompeii is.
Thank you, and I know you're all going to get your lazy donkey and start working on that.
Thank you. Thank you for what. Join us next Monday for our final wonder on hip hop.
Please join us.
I don't know either. I'm so sorry. Well, yours was good. Yours was perfect.
Yeah, yours was